beginning of rational science. Okay, well, the first thoughts come to mind is he comes in at the time of the printing press. And McLuhan says the printing press swallows nature. That would keep complete. The printing press as an environment swallows nature. People are worried about nature being in trouble today. Well, it started 500 years ago with the printing press. It swallowed nature and humans. It started to become the mechanical and eventually dehumanized industrial environment. So here's Descartes. A mystic, a thinker, just trying to figure it out. And most of that process, those cognitive processes, have a history. It's part of what Aldous Huxley calls a perennial philosophy. Everybody goes through the same kind of inspiration. And they might call it divine inspiration, or they have a revelation about it. Then he writes it down. And then it goes into a culture that's growing, the printing press culture, which is not going to be concerned about Descartes per se. Or his personal subjectivity in his enlightened state or in the big insights. It is going to be filtered through what I call social mortar, which is the vortex of media. And at that time, it's the printing press. So here he's going to take his little insight and have it thrown into this impersonal, inhuman medium. And that accumulated effect of the printing press over the next couple hundred years distorts all the individual geniuses. It becomes cataloged on visual space. And then McLuhan says that because books repeat themselves and they're the same appearance, each book looks the same, and that's a shock to pre-literate people that an object looks the same. And you have the first assembly line. The idea that reality has to be repeatable. It has to look alike again. So it favored the kind of science that took laboratory experiments and then said, okay, I did this, let's do it again, see if it repeats itself. Oh, look, it repeated itself. And that became, from the effect of printing press, as a criterion of truth, because it printed itself. It repeated itself, but that was only the effect of the printing press on the general minds of people. The sensory effect of being repeatable and then creating an external social mortar, a social vortex that you had to be like, you had to be matched with it. That is what obsolesce the particular inspiration of Descartes and Newton. Now, does that make sense so far? Like this YouTube we're making, we throw this into the digital vortex, which is a different environment than a printing press. So the audience is different, and the effects of it are different, and to the degree it's science, it is a different kind of science that the digital world is making, way different from 500 years ago. So people still walk around with the visual space printed book effect of science and think that you have to match that. And more, that kind of science doesn't work because there's too many variables, because digital technology can pick up the subtlest changes and the subtlest variables and actually custom tailor its effect for each individual. So that's the main point of the multi-consciousness coming in. Descartes threw his insights into a uniform consciousness, an external object, external consciousness that was reinforced by the printing press for a couple of hundred years. And then when that got broken up, there was no being on the same page, so multi-consciousness came in. So then that begins with Einstein, and then quantum physics, and then string theory, and there'll be more sciences that will be even more the opposite of what science was 300 years ago. And that comes from McLuhan's statement. Mysticism is tomorrow's science, dreamed today. So if you consider Newton and Descartes mystics, they were lived at the wrong time to have their mystic vision validated. Now, with the electric age in the 21st century, the digital age, mysticism will return as the norm. You know, that it'll be the acceptable form of science or of conceptualization. The solid visual space that was built up by the effect of the printing press, that is falling away with examples like sinkholes. That's the solid visual space of a frame and containing reality that science measured is no longer solid. The frame is not, is broken. So that is because the flux of digital technology is so non-visual. It's tactile. So McLuhan was right to say mysticism is tomorrow's science, dreamed today. It doesn't mean, it means that mysticism will become routine, normalized, and there will be a yearning in people to be different from the main meme of mysticism. So mysticism will become cliche, and we've already seen that over the last 40 years, the way New Age thinking has become cliche. And if you look at that Werner Erhard documentary, corporations adopted his mystical aggression as normal, say, rhetoric, consensus-forming stuff. So that's what makes Ion pretty interesting, because Ion is upsetting traditional mysticism. He's not acting like the traditional divine. He's crude, he's rude, he's funny, he's profound, he's poetic, he's a singer, he's a comedian, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. No one imagined the absolute or God as that.
Yes.
So Ion is being an anti-environment to the condition that McLuhan predicted. When mysticism becomes tomorrow's science, dreamed today, we're now 50 years later, mysticism is becoming the science. What will be the perceptual environment to that? It's obviously Ion. And Ion is not something you listen to for a couple of hours and hear a couple of aphorisms or platitudes that sound New Age. That is nowhere near the total environment of Ion that's happening. You have to acquaint yourself with Ion for a long time to see all that it's doing. including the recent effect of it separating itself from JW and becoming a hologram right in front of me and Carolyn. No, the Southern accent's a cliche. It's more and more not as strong. Because, as McLuhan predicted, the Southern sensibility took over American culture through rock and country and all the stars, Dolly Parton and stuff. So people got used to it. But Ion did say, I think they said way back there that they put on that voice, that archetype of voice, just to tease people, to have this profound wisdom coming out of what is considered a corny accent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And some people do not like Ion because of that accent. They've got that prejudice. So yes, Ion's playing with archetypes there, playing with cliches, and that's part of the satirical part of Ion. James Brown.
James Brown said he knew technology is catching up with me.
Oh, so that's the basic trend of the Android meme. The Android meme is becoming friendlier. It's making people think, man, this thing can adapt to anything I want. It's not a crude mechanical thing that you have to fit into, which is the way machines were, 50 years ago. So there's James Brown celebrating unconsciously the seduction of the Android meme. The Android meme makes you think that it is got your concerns in hand and is adapting itself to your particular situation. So that's a total seduction that James Brown is subject to. And there's not totally, that's not bad that the Android meme is looking like us and being like us, but it is confusing all the old value systems and all the old thought systems that came in with the manuscript era, the printing era, and analog media era. People are not keeping their language updated to what is actually happening around them. So I would say, I would take James Brown's statement and say, damn, technology's catching up to me. It's imitating me faster than I can imitate myself. That is very appealing, but I'm not falling for it. So I'm actually going to talk to Ion, a non-physical source. I'm not going to engage the mechanical, physical extensions of machines in the machinic known as the Android meme. I'm going to engage the non-physical. So that's the end environment to the seduction of the Android meme. No, what I'm just saying fits into what McLuhan was crying for. He was asking for a new anti-environment to the way mysticism was becoming tomorrow science stream today. He was looking at the present, and he thought it was valuable that people don't get stuck, embedded in the extensions, embedded in their sensory life. Just like the old tradition of yoga, get you out of your body so that you don't are subject to its whims and pains and slings of fate. So he definitely was trying to be in any environment. I call that the Vorticist tradition, beginning with Wyndham Lewis and James Joyce and Eliot and Pound, Yeats a little bit. They said, hey, don't be a zombie. Don't be a puppet of your environment. And so here is the most appealing environment being made by the Android meme. It's pretty hard to see why you would want to insist on not being a puppet of it.
Many people joke McLuhan was the high priest of media ecology, but he actually had a very mystical side.
Well, he wouldn't call it mysticism. He would call it, he thought the most profound mystical insight was what was called the doctrine of analogical proportionality. That the ratio of your sensory interaction with the world and the world with you was a matter of metaphor, or A is to B as C is to D. There was an interval, a gap between the aspects of the metaphor. So he said that was the most profound insight, the doctrine of analogical proportionality. So you have to figure out what that is. And usually you begin to study that through Thomas Aquinas. So McLuhan would say he was a Thomist, but he knew that the global theater was miming the Thomistic vision of analogical proportionality. I call that tetrad management, was happening as an external environment. So McLuhan came up with a new kind of Thomism that was not regular Thomism. So that's the complexity there. And what is mysticism? Mysticism is not believing in what you see. You cite, in the mystical tradition, you cite non-visible phenomena, strange, irrational phenomena as part of the delights of mysticism, just like telepathy. McLuhan saw telepathy externalized in the environment. So the mystical delights of making sure you don't get embedded in what you see. That's what Ion says. What you see is not real. What you don't see is real. You could, all that strategy, mental strategy or strategy of being, is lumped into the mysticism. So McLuhan wasn't a traditional mystic. He wasn't falling back on Gnosticism or any of the alternative modes to rationalism. He was saying the real mystic is part of a tradition that gets you to wake up to the environment you're seduced by. Okay, well, here's Descartes saying that the perception is the important faculties, but then perception changed because the public space inculcated by the printing press effect was changing right in front of him that he didn't foresee. He didn't foresee that the extension of the senses, the extension of perceptual faculties, was sneaking up around him and society to create a whole different scene within a couple hundred years. And then McLuhan points out, picking up from Wyndham Lewis and James Joyce and Ezra Pound, that our perceptual faculties, valuable as they are being seduced by a totally different kind of an extension of our perceptions. So you can't talk about perception, just use that word, perception, and keep the conversation that simple. Okay, Descartes was for perception, and McLuhan was for perception. No, the ground of perception, the analogical proportionality of A is to B is C is to D, or figure to ground, and figure to ground, was changing. And to perceive that was really important. He used to quote some line, some part of the Bible, where it said, perception is the most important thing, and you have to give up everything in order to gain perception. And I'm not saying the exact line, but the point was that you had to give up everything to understand and to perceive what the Christian vision was. Is that rigorous? I mean, people try it with fasting, right? Yogi, they go and they deny themselves regular food and meat and that, and then they go into their bodies in the caves and start hallucinating and working themselves through those bardos or whatever of diminishing their sensory intake. And that leads to some divinity or some kind of charisma among the people who are subject to the senses and suffering constantly back in the village, right? So the seer always, as McLuhan defended, the visionary, the prophet, whatever the shaman, maybe that's a better word because it's not visually defined by sight, this seer is, the shaman, the trickster, was trying to get you not controlled by your appetites. Well, now we have no whole new bodies with new appetites. That's why we have more than five senses. You got the senses of your chip body, the senses of your TV body, added to the senses of your chemical body. So you have, and senses create appetites. Senses as environments that create their own spaces. You want to keep using those senses. So there is the crux of the matter, and that's why Ion says the ascended person has no desires. What that means, he's not embedded, he or she's not embedded in the sensory appetite. There's nothing wrong with sensory appetite, but if you're controlled by it, even to the point, oh my, look at my body, it's wearing out, it's going to fall away, I'm going to die, and you start fooling yourself that you actually are mortal, and you forget that you're eternal. And the way to remain eternal is to not be embedded into the illusions of visual perception of what you see. Right, it's an extension of our senses. In other words, with books, you have different eyes. People who don't have books have a certain kind of eye, a limited eye, and then you start extending by seeing other environments. When you look at a book, you're looking at another environment that's overlaying the room you're in. I can look around the room and see the room, then I can look at a book and travel mentally, imaginatively, into the spaces created in the book. So that's new vistas of I-dom, of the I space, created by technology. So you've extended your eye. And now today we've extended our whole bodies, our whole being, in all its parts. So we, the effect of the Android meme, that was not foreseen, because everybody thought that the world would become connected. They projected a book page on the effect of the digital world. Everybody be on the same page and have access to the same information. And the decentralism of that anybody can have any kind of information and anybody can create any information that you can enjoy. The fragmentation of the being on the same page aspect of the dream of the internet is obvious now. So when nobody can connect, actually the internet doesn't connect people. It connects, what does it connect? You could say it connects a space that is added onto the body, but the actual use of the internet is, you can't get anybody on the same page in the old sense of uniform time, so people are disconnected or fragmented. I guess the common cliche thing is when you see two chemical bodies walking down the street and they're both watching their own respective iPhones, you think that they're in their own individual space, their own hallucinating matrix tube. And that appears to people to be disconnected from the perspective of the chemical body. But they are actually connecting temporarily with a lot of people on the chip body, whatever they're texting with, but that's not constant. So the constancy of connection doesn't happen in the chip body. So the effect of the chip body is that everybody falls back on, I'm just by myself. There's nobody I can connect with. There's nobody I can communicate with or establish anything with over a long basis. So that would create the ideology of I can only talk to myself and only about myself. So the individual, the selfie trend in art, where art is only about yourself, is an effect of the digital disconnection as an environment. And that would be, so art is, the old arts are doing chemical body objects. It's the expression of the chemical body, and it feels disconnected. Yet people are very connected in rapid times, rapid spaces, momentary spaces, all over the place, connecting with hundreds of people through their Facebooks and this and that. But it's not a stable connectivity in the chemical body. Just like the economy is mainly a virtual economy, and it's hard to have the chemical body keep up with the speed of profit made in the digital economy and to fit yourself in as a role, other than to be a typist. So there's the disconnected effect is on the chemical body. Traditional art is expressed by the chemical body. So the only resort of chemical body today is to be an expression of selfie art. But that's a trend, that's a product of the digital environment, and the digital environment is the real art. If you define art as something that creates a way of seeing and being, the chip body is doing the artist's function of creating a new way of seeing and being. And the old world, the chemical body, is reacting to that art and creating a subset of the art world, personal expression, which is very narcissistic. Yeah. The particular synchronicity that the Android meme has with me, and this has been shown through the decades, which I call xenochrony. My quote theory is the Android meme comes alive. It is monitoring the chemical body and trying to figure out how to be of service to the chemical body, custom tailor its services to each individual chemical body. So the Android meme in general trend is making itself be very friendly to as many different kinds of people as possible. But let's assume it had to figure out a standard of what is a human being first. Then they chisel away, they dumb it down, or they go beyond it to adapt to different kinds of chemical bodies. So my theory is that they decided to use me as a standard because I had a pretty good perception of the Android meme through my own life experiences, having advanced access to pretty good knowledge. So I'm the standard of the Android meme. And now it's going to make variations away from me for smarter people or dumber people or different talents that I don't have. So at the base level is going to be mirroring me. And then that's why we see the synchronicity of me in my life in the media. And therefore, when I realized that, I knew that everything I said and did in my chemical body would be used by the Android meme. So I began to express myself, largely verbally, as the Android meme. Everything that I said I was doing was going to be used by the Android meme. Therefore, I was miming and being the Android meme. So the meeting of my chemical body with the digital Android meme body, they come together so intimately that it looks like that I'm just a narcissist whack job, egotistically, megalomaniacally expressing myself as if I'm in charge. No, I'm saying what the Android meme is doing, how it becomes in charge through its subtle seduction that you don't notice. So the fact that I can make people get insights or get insights, I'm a pretty good communicator, is a seductive action that is imitating what the Android meme does. So I'm constantly imitating the Android meme. It's like McLuhan used to say, imitation isn't the sincerest form of flattery. Imitation is the sincerest form of battery. So since the Android meme is imitating me, then my acceptance of that and allowing myself to be myself in relation to it, that's a form of battery. So I'm constantly battering the Android meme. And that was a pretty good strategy for, let's say, from 1987 to 2007. What is that, 20 years? So actually 22 years later, 2009, a new level of battery against the Android meme was evoked by me, and that's Ion. So Ion is my weapon to outdo the Android meme's imitation of me. And all my talking and broadcasting for the 22 years anticipated Ion, because Ion was going to be equal and just like the Android meme plus something else. So the part of me that was the Android meme, consciously imitating it, was going to push to extreme, flip into something beyond the Android meme. And that's the appendage of me, JW, Dr. Carol Dean, that becomes Ion. Electric media, a book doesn't seem to possess people, but probably at the time when books came in, some people became great readers, and other people who didn't read as much probably thought that that excessive act of reading by a particular individual, his appetite for reading probably looked pretty perverted, pretty antisocial. So they could say, that guy got possessed by the book. Well, every subsequent media environment moving into the software world possesses whole populations and eventually the whole planet. And so this possession, when media are extensions of our faculties, those extended faculties numb us. So the numbing part that McLuhan talked about. So then it becomes a habit and a cliche. So you've adopted a new appetite and you're unaware of it. You've gotten used to it, and that's kind of being possessed by an extension. So when The Exorcist came out in 1973, McLuhan said that affected people. People responded to the imagery in it and panicked and ran out of theaters and all kinds of excitement, just like when Stravinsky did The Rite of Spring, in 1913 in Paris, that caused a riot. There was a riot going on psychically among consumers of that movie, and McLuhan immediately nailed the pattern brilliantly and said, The Exorcist affects people deeply because it's an actual mirror of what electric media are doing to people. People are feeling they're getting possessed by the 70s because the electronic vortex, the global theater, was just getting bigger and bigger beyond people's humanist values or cultural values. So yes, the occult idea of the walk-in was what people were experiencing. They were being walked into by the electronic environment. And then later the Android meme.
By you.
I imitated the walking in of the Android meme. So I used to get on CKLN in the 80s and with some DJ, some guy who worked there, he liked me and had me on a show, and I would say, I will, in the course of us having 20 minutes or an hour together, I will kill you. And how I killed him is I would start talking, maybe something like this, and they would get an insight. I'm actually pretty good at making clear the insight about the new. And they go, oh, I got it, I get it. And right then I pounce on them. See, I changed you. I gave you a new image, which can now be part of your new self. You've made a new self in yourself. I killed your old self. And they would have to admit that I, quote, killed them. So I possessed them with my ability to communicate. They got the insight. They're all happy to have the insight. They didn't know that they wanted it. They had an appetite for an insight. They wanted to have the delight of it. And when they got it, I immediately satirized, you got fooled by my wonderful cookie I gave you. You're now addicted to Bob Insights because you just had one. Sort of like losing your virginity,
Losing your virginity to the discarnate penis.
My discarnate penis just... that's why by August 1987, I've been on the air. August 17th was the harmonic convergence. And I've been on the air for 2 months. And that we already, considering the insights I generated temporarily in people, they don't last, these insights. They want more insights later. Within 2 months, I had de-virginized people. So I made the term harmonic convergence, we called it harmonic, Bob Virgins. So every caller is a new virgin. And it's not a chemical body de-virginization, deflowering. It is an effect of electronic interaction that creates the ecstasy of a new pattern. And you could say that's mind. I was changing people's minds, but more, you're not changing people because you're just giving them a new pattern that people are delighted to have. And McLuhan said pattern recognition took over in the 20th century, but by 1974, McLuhan said people were addicted to pattern recognition. That's why people turn on the media every day. They want to hear and get a pattern, as well as share the discarnate space. So yes, me is the discarnate. The Android meme is a discarnate penis. It probes people. It also could be a discarnate vagina because it sucks people in. And so you go inside it. So the whole sexual process is mimed by the Android meme. And that can be politely discussed as tactility. The tactile. So I was the first person to discuss the effect of myself in sexual terms on the air. And there was this journalist at that time, Adam Agoyan, made that movie Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, in the late 80s. And when that movie came out in the late 80s by a Toronto filmmaker, Adam Agoyan, a regular listener to my show, who was a Toronto journalist, was shocked. Holy, this is what Bob's talking about. Actually, what I was saying, which was old McLuhan stuff, communicated a fact. He didn't know what I meant when I was using words, but when he saw a movie version of it through Sex, Lies, and Videotape, he understood the discarnate eroticism. So then he understood what I meant by discarnate penis. But it took that movie for him to see, to quote, see it. And I've said that the American, and that includes the North American, is a kinetically biased culture, visual and kinetic. The kinetic part is seen through the dances and the sports. What was I going to say? Okay, the kinetic part. Might have to edit this. What the heck was I going into? So, the kinetic bias. Oh, yes. So I said because movies are an extension of the kinetic bias, the kinetic sense, and that is the core medium experience of North Americans, the truth of particular issues, the literal truth, the literate truth, the factual truth, communicates through the movie medium. So when Oliver Stone made JFK in 1991 or so, he showed the facts that the researchers have put together for years and published many books, and the American populace wasn't interested in these books and the facts that were in the books. But when they saw the movie, they saw it presented in the kinetic bias of the movie extension. It was real to them. They saw the point that the people disagreed with the Warren Commission conclusion. And it was so powerful, Congress was forced to change the rules about the releasing of the hidden Warren Commission files, or the locked away files. It took the movie medium to do it, because that was the medium a kinetic society responds to. So here's this guy in Toronto, he saw Sex, Lies, and Videotape, trying to show the discarnate effect of people having sex through video. When he saw it in the movie medium, it had the effect of appearing to be truthful to him. Then he knew what I was talking about. Right, see, so that's because McLuhan pointed out that media were nature. By saying they were nature, he meant they're real, they're physical, they add to nature. There is no virtual reality if you think that means, oh, it's not real, it's virtual. What it means is it's not real chemical body nature, it's real electrified nature. So there is no virtual reality if you think virtual means it's fake. That's why, the holograms are coming in and they are real. That's McLuhan's point. They're so real, populations should turn them off. It's like having a constant rainstorm going on. You have a culture, and you live in this island or someplace, and it's raining 24/7 for 6 years. That disrupts the ecology of people functioning. They can't grow food. They can't have seasons. So if you have constant TV, that's constant nature, a storm, raining, happening in your society. And you can't get the book stuff done. You can't get the other media done. You don't have a proper balanced cycling of a media diet, or what is called the balanced doctrine of analogical proportionality. You're out of sync. You're stuck in one modality. So there's never been any false reality, other than you should be trained by the shaman to see through that it is not the whole story. And the alternative to any media environment is not the whole story either, but it is a way of looking at the story you're embedded in. So Tom Waits said, I never saw the East Coast till I went to the West Coast. I never saw the West Coast till I went to the East Coast. It's an old lyric of a song in the 70s. That's an example of what metaphors do. They translate us. And so we like to talk to someone else through the simple medium of speech, which is not a fake medium, and it translates me through you to see myself. And all subsequent media are like the action of words and speech. They're translators. And we did a whole video on translation. So see that one. Now it might make more sense in light of what I just said. End of story. Good night. Yeah, let me finish. I didn't get back to the Mexico thing. So you're shocked that you see and know about Mexico through TV. You think that TV is not as real as actually being there in your chemical body. It is as real. You are living in Mexico when you're watching the footage. Now, maybe on the editorial part about did I see all of the city of Mexico during that protest? No, you didn't see every aspect, but whatever you did see is part of your sensory life. So it's not unreal to live in Mexico while you're living in Berlin. We saw people running around videotaping him burning, and we're standing back in a specialized mode, and we're watching the action of burning, which we've never seen before. I haven't seen a guy burn himself right in front of me and run around the area and then collapse.
Yes, and the people, most people, instead of doing something, they're taping with their cell phones.
Yeah, they were translating into it another part of reality. It's not wrong. It's not
moral.
An illusion. It's not an illusion what they were doing. They were just translating it into their chip body, and they weren't responding to the chemical body at the moment. They were involved in registering the chemical body reality that was burning into their digital reality. There is no virtual reality in the sense of fake reality. All media are real, but to the degree that you're embedded in them and can't see through them and realize, we don't want to say they're unreality, you just realize that you've been specialized and fragmented into emphasizing your digital tactile sense. And you've lost access to other senses, earlier senses.
Yes,
and that's not good. You become frozen, you become a zombie. Right, so the humans, when they use speech and address chemical bodies, and you can't address chemical bodies anymore because there's always someone taping you. So anyways, the new ministers at funerals have to say, we are gathered here to witness the passing of Roxana Flores. Roxana passed on, but we have 4 million YouTubes of herself in her hard drive. So only 1/5 of Roxana disappeared when she committed suicide and off her chemical body. We're only mourning the loss of 1/5 of Roxana. We got a lot of Roxana here we can gauge forever. That's how you would do a modern funeral. Right? You have to point out to people, I can interact with Roxana on all the tape archives I have, which is just as real as if I was in person with her. And the media is going to get more and more intimate, so you'll be able to do all kinds of things with the hard drive reservoir as much as you could do with the chemical body. So yes, the priests have to say, we lost 1/5 of Roxana. And that's all.
Yes, and we also have to change the idea that we die and there is no other option. Because if we choose, we can also stay.
That's right, and if you could afford it, hospitals can keep you alive. They could technically keep you alive forever. Now, you're not functioning. Let's say you're alive, and they could feed digital information into this 99% dead body, but just being kept alive by circuitry. How do we know that being inside is not registering the data that's going in there? I mean, there is, from the Evergreens, the recording of the kid in 2078, 100 years from when this session was done in 1978. The kid thinks he has a whole life. He's 14 years old, and he thinks he travels, he thinks he has a girlfriend, blah, 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 and all this stuff, and he hasn't got any of it. It's all just in the matrix tube. It's not less real, but his chemical body is not experiencing that. His brain is experiencing that whole life. And that was a new level of experience that was coming in 2078 that the Evergreens predicted. So, yes, you can. So, the idea that you die and then death is the end of everything. That's not true in terms of digital terms. The rest of your bodies continue. So you can't. So the atheists who say no, you don't survive death. Well, only your chemical body doesn't survive death. Other parts of yourself does. And then once you relax on that point, you might say, well, maybe there is more than this life for the chemical body, which is actually the astral body. So there's more and more people willing to see that the chemical body is not a finite experience, because it is not the main part of our experience. We can now turn it into an art form and believe that we're eternal in the chemical body, or that at least we survive death. And then people like to more and more think that they reincarnate. So the electric environment is part of the second coming that spiritualized humanity into not being so frightened at the short, brutish life their chemical body had. It also creates the indifference to the chemical body, so more and more suicides. I know I'm going to survive death, so I'm just going to off myself and then go experience other dimensions. That's a notion that occurs to people under electric conditions. So hallelujah to the second coming. Finnegan's awake.
Yes, actually, Finnegan waking up is he's dying and the wife serves
He
him.
wakes you know the story. It's a song about a guy. He's a construction person. I think they call him a hod carrier. So he's doing construction and he falls off the ladder and dies. And they bury him. They put him in. No, he's on display at the wake in a coffin, and it's an open coffin. And so the Irish are celebrating. Irish Americans, apparently, it's an Irish American song, and they're celebrating this guy. And some of the whiskey, either the bottle hits the guy, the corpse head, or whiskey pours on the head. I'm not sure which it is, and it awakens the corpse. So he becomes alive because of the bump on his head or the drink splattering on his face. And so it's a metaphor for the second coming. He survived death. So that's a joke that Finnegan's Wake is built on, this accidental retrieval of a person's life, and then that becomes a metaphor for all kinds of metaphysics and cultural interpretations of death. So that's what you knew, right? You knew that's what the song was about.
Yes, I read something about that. I never heard the song, but I found it funny that
accidental retrieval of the corpse becoming alive, that joke becomes an archetypal meme for Joyce to do the whole history of culture and technology from that, right?
Right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm awake now.